All right, we're back with another one. Pardon my hair. I just woke up from a gnarly post training nap. If you're going to nap after training, you got to go the whole 90 minutes because it's a full sleep cycle. So, did that and I'm feeling great. Ivan Abadreyev, the greatest weightlifting coach of all time, once said between sessions, if you are standing, sit down. If you're sitting, lay down. If you're laying down, go to sleep. Recover, maintain your energy. Anyway, this is a reply video to the comment on my discussion post about research types. Pardon my eye discipline. I'm going to be going back and forth a lot because I'm referencing the sheet here. The big question for short-term research with the larger interventions is ultimately for what purpose? Why do we do stuff like this? When I think about short-term interventions, the reason for doing them would be to try some sort of methodology or some sort of practice that is pretty radically different from what the subject is doing now, or is radically different from the current pattern of behavior, to see if we can elicit a big change. Things like that are harder to maintain in long-term research. So in the shorter-term researches, you can make bigger changes and yield bigger results. So I think the ultimate purpose of the shorter-term research is to really be able to dive into some of these more drastic concepts. Think like if I have a weightlifter, let's say, who in their first prep phase of a training block is consistently doing tens. I really like sets of 10 as my metric. A short-term intervention would look like, hey, for this one training block, we're going to try something drastically different and see what happens. So if we apply the same question to the long research with the smaller interventions that are a little bit more chronic, I think the ultimate purpose of the longer interventions is to be able to validate some of these smaller changes that we can make either to training or to diet or to behavior or whatever the thing is that we're studying. So the longer interventions, because the interventions are smaller in nature, we can study much longer periods of time where people can be consistent. If you were to ask a weightlifter, for example, hey, I want you to change your training for the next 5 years so that I can document what happens, it may have too much of an impact on their athletic potential. It may have too much of an impact on their results and their sleep schedule and their nutrition needs and all this stuff. So if you're going to have a long-term study, it needs to be a small, manageable thing that people can keep up with. So I think clinically, let's take like a clinical example. A long-term intervention could be adding a medication over a period of years. Behaviorally, it is not a ton to add to the routine. You've added one thing as opposed to maybe a short-term intervention that's studying multiple different things at the same time. So once again, the ultimate purpose of the long-term stuff is to look at smaller changes and how they can be implemented chronically over much vaster periods of time. Now, the next question I'm looking at, is it feasible and relevant to include short with small interventions and long with large interventions? I think it's definitely feasible. I think the least feasible one is large interventions over a long period of time because you're demanding a lot of behavior change, no matter what the thing is. The smaller interventions over a longer period of time allow for more consistency. I think smaller interventions over smaller periods of time are maybe not as effective because you don't yield as big of a result, but they're certainly feasible because you're not asking for that much of a behavior change. So I think it's all about, in terms of these experiments and this research, like what are you asking people to do? If you're asking people to completely reframe the way that they think about something or completely change a routine, you might need to make that a shorter term intervention because what's the likelihood that they're going to be able to follow that over multiple years? Same thing with the long-term interventions. If you're making the same thing with the short-term interventions. If you're asking someone to make a really large change, but it's only for a month or a few weeks, it's much, much more feasible. But smaller interventions over a shorter period of time, I also think are feasible. They just don't yield maybe as clear of a result. I hope this all makes sense. I know this was kind of rambly as I'm trying to answer the questions, but yeah, these are my thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoy them. Thank you.